The sun was setting over the manicured lawns of Silver Oaks Manor, when Iris Vance first felt the chill of a trap closing around me. My grandson Leo had held my hand so tightly when he dropped me off, promising that this was the pinnacle of luxury, and that my golden years would be spent in total peace. He spoke of the 24-hour medical staff, and the gourmet meals and the high security that would keep me safe from the world outside. But as I watched his sleek black car disappear down the winding driveway, I felt less like a resident and more like a prisoner. Silver Oaks was beautiful in a sterile way, with white marble floors that echoed every footstep, and nurses who smiled with their teeth, but never with their eyes. I was 74 years old and far from senile. But Leo had convinced the courts that my recent forgetfulness, which was really just grief over my husband's passing, was enough to grant him power of attorney. It didn't take long for the polish to wear off. The first week I noticed Mrs. Carabello, a vibrant woman who lived in the suite next to mine, suddenly stopped coming to the bridge club. When I asked about her, a nurse named Becky told me she had suffered a rapid cognitive decline and was being moved to the high care wing, which was off limits to most residents. I saw Becky taking a stack of papers out of Mrs. Carabello's room that looked suspiciously like bank statements. 2 days later, I saw Dr. Hansen, the director of the facility, leaning into a black sedan in the parking lot and shaking hands with Leo. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the exchange of a thick envelope was hard to miss. My blood ran cold as I realized Silver Oaks wasn't a sanctuary. It was a harvest ground where the wealthy elderly were brought to be quietly bled dry of their life savings. I knew I couldn't go to the police because Dr. Hansen had already filed reports suggesting I was prone to hallucinations and paranoia. I needed a team, so I started watching. I spent my afternoons in the communal sunroom pretending to doze off over a knitting project while actually observing the patterns of the staff and the residents. I found my first ally in Arthur, a former investigative journalist who spent his days staring out the window at the bird feeder. He seemed catatonic to the nurses, but when I sat beside him and whispered that I knew about the bank transfers, his eyes snapped into sharp focus, and he told me he had been keeping a mental log of every resident who disappeared into the high care wing. Next was Martha, an 80-year-old who had been a head librarian for 40 years. She was small and frail, but she had managed to swipe a master key card from a distracted orderly during a blood pressure check. We began to meet in the laundry room at midnight, the only place where the security cameras had a blind spot. Arthur called us the Windows Watch because we were the ones seeing what the world chose to ignore. Our mission was simple but dangerous. We had to get into Dr. Hansen's private office and find the physical ledgers because the digital ones were encrypted beyond our reach. Martha used her key card to get us into the administrative wing on a Tuesday night, while Arthur created a distraction by triggering a false fire alarm in the dining hall. I moved through the shadows of the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. When I entered Hansen's office, the smell of expensive leather and cigars was suffocating. I found a hidden safe behind a portrait of the Manor's founder, but I didn't have a combination. I remembered Leo's birthday, which was also the date Silver Oaks was incorporated, and I tried the numbers 0612. The heavy door clicked open. Inside were files on every resident, each one marked with a $sign and an estimated date of total asset liquidation. My name was there at the top of the list with a note saying that my house in the Hills was slated for sale by the end of the month. I took photos of the documents with a small camera Arthur had managed to hide in his hollowed-out book. As I was leaving, I heard footsteps and had to hide under the heavy oak desk. The heavy boots of Dr. Hansen stopped inches from my fingers. He was on the phone, and I heard him tell Leo that the paperwork for my house was ready, but that I needed to be moved to high care by Friday to ensure no one talked to me. I waited until he left, then crawled out. Shaking with a cold fury, I returned to my room and met with Arthur and Martha. The next morning, we knew the authorities in town were likely in Hansen's pocket, so we had to go higher. Arthur used a hidden prepaid phone to contact a former colleague at the state attorney's office, while I spent my day acting even more confused and docile to throw Becky off the scent. On Thursday afternoon, Leo arrived with a fake smile and a set of papers for me to sign, claiming they were just for a routine insurance update. I looked at him and saw not the boy I had baked cookies for, but a predator who viewed my life as a series of digits. I signed the papers, but I used a secret signature my husband and I had designed for emergencies, a tiny X inside the loop of the V that would signal to our family lawyer that I was under duress. But I knew the lawyer might be compromised too, so the real move was yet to come. Friday morning arrived and Becky came to My room, with a sedative in a plastic cup telling me it was time for my transition to the more comfortable wing. I looked her in the eye and told her I wasn't thirsty, and that she should probably check the lobby because guests had arrived. Hansen had blocked all visitors, but he couldn't block a federal search warrant. The state attorney's office had moved faster than we hoped thanks to Arthur's evidence. As the sirens grew louder, Hansen tried to bolt for the back exit, but Martha had used her key card to lock the electronic gates from the inside. He was trapped. The police flooded the building, and I saw Leo being handcuffed in the driveway, his face pale and eyes darting in terror. I walked out to the porch and stood with Arthur and Martha watching the collapse of the empire built on our silence. Arthur handed me a cigarette he wasn't supposed to have, and we watched the sunset for real this time, knowing the window was finally closed on the predators of Silver Oaks. I moved back to my house in the hills and used the remains of my savings to fund a legal clinic specifically for seniors, ensuring that no grandson or doctor could ever treat a human being like a bank account again. I still look out the window every evening, but now I see a world where the light finally reached the shadows and the watch was over. I am no longer a victim. I am the survivor who fought back and won in a world that thought I was invisible.